Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today we welcome a friend from Romania, so thanks for making this time slot work, Ben. Ben's one of the founders of Elrond, so a project that we've been talking about a little bit on the channel. It's been in the news and there's been a lot of hype lately around it, so it's another layer 1 protocol that's also hoping to complement and I guess interact with other protocols. So welcome to the channel, Ben, and for those that haven't followed Elrond at all, do you want to give them maybe the short version and then we'll get into the specifics later on?
Sure. Hello, Alex, and really great to be here and have this conversation. So the basic idea and goal of Elrond is that we're trying to build the backbone for a high bandwidth, low latency, transparent and decentralized financial system. And then secondly, build the interface through which we can make this new financial system accessible to anyone, anywhere in the world. Of course, the first part is a layer 1 blockchain that we've built for the last 3 years that is very scalable and highly performant. And then the second element is a social money wallet that is, I think, perhaps the most intuitive and simple product in the space. So happy to have the conversation about all of this.
Cool, very cool. So, yeah, I think even I've been talking a lot on the channel recently about how MetaMask is kind of the industry leader as a wallet, and it's still pretty hard to use. And yeah, there's those problems that need to be solved because a lot of people are tech smart and they're still not really thinking about the end user. But I guess at the same stage, the tech isn't exactly ready for the whole world and the end user. So you can always find people that say it's not good enough, and then you can find developers that say, well, it's not ready yet. So it's all a little bit of a trade-off, I guess, isn't it?
No, I would say that we try to basically set a new standard in both the performance really needed to build applications that can process things at the internet scale. This is why we've built Elrond, and it's why we can process more than 15,000 transactions per second. It's a very important step forward, and with this done, I believe during the next period, everyone will face the huge elephant in the room, which will be UX. Yeah. And I think it's surprising, and it will be surprisingly difficult to solve something that seems so simple if you look at it, but then to make it simple, it's at least as difficult as solving the technical problem. So yeah. We're quite excited to have this out, both the architecture and the wallet, and happy to get any feedback on those.
Cool. Yeah, I think most people know, like who follow the channel, that we love to dive into these things and have an honest look at it all. And one of the first things I sort of said to Ben is, what are the trade-offs with the blockchain trilemma that we call it? You can't, well, typically you can't have all three. You know, you can't have a really fast blockchain that's really secure, you know, and really decentralized as well with that high throughput. So I guess my question to you would be, how have you, if you're saying that you've got all three, like how have you gone about that others haven't been able to so far?
Sure. The idea is, as I've responded to your question, is that I think at different times you basically have some limitations with respect to what hardware can do, software can do, but those limitations are not necessarily limitations of the technology per se, but rather limitations or constraints that you might have at that particular time because of the different designs that have been chosen. So specifically with Bitcoin and Ethereum, we have some architecture design limitations that are pretty much known in the space, and for those decisions, you basically have a trade-off that is very clear. And I believe this is the trilemma where things really made sense. So the trilemma for Bitcoin and Ethereum made sense. It described the kind of trade-offs that they had to do themselves. Yeah. But I would say that moving forward, you basically, as you build a new architecture, based on the decisions you make, you have a different solution space. So the solutions that you can propose and come up with are based on this initial designs. And with Elrond, we're basically, we've built the first state sharded proof of stake architecture that was adaptive. We presented the model back when things seemed like you would never be able to deliver such an architecture. For a long time, this was basically the argument against state sharding and so forth, that no, this is basically impossible. It's just some interesting design, but you will not be able to deliver it.
Yeah, now, I was going to say, I had PivX on the channel the other day, and a lot of people like don't know that PivX have got a proof of stake blockchain, and they've been doing this stuff for a while. So there are little projects out there that are already doing these things that some Bitcoin maximalists still say, oh, proof of stake will never work at scale and things like that, but it's already happening.
Exactly. And then we're very, very excited to see, as I said, when we started Elrond, we started after being in the space for a long time, investing first in some of the most interesting architectures that I thought were going to solve and address some of these problems. And then seeing that none of them would deliver, we really gathered a team with which we can literally build rockets, and then decided to tackle this problem head on. It was a super painful experience at times to really go through the hell and deliver this. We've had to reinvent ourselves every step of the way. But the idea is that when you can come up with this product, launch it in production, which is very different than launching a prototype, launching one of the pieces, and then still not solving all the different things that you need to address. You really discover that you can build a lot more than what you currently see in the space. And this is why we're extremely excited, because we've called Elrond the internet scale blockchain, in the sense that once you have sufficiently high performance, you basically never worry about performance anymore. It's like the transition from dial-up to broadband. Once you have broadband, you're focusing on the real stuff. So what can I build? Who are the users? Who can I solve a real problem for? But unless you had the broadband interface, infrastructure, you could not build all the interesting applications. And I think this applies to blockchain as well. And we're very excited for the period to come.
So, as you say, there's a lot of challenges. A lot of the, even Ethereum, it was a lot of research, and they've pivoted in what the roadmap was. Bitcoin still doesn't have a set roadmap to scale. A lot of this research is constantly changing. So what, I guess, was your initial plan, and how's that changed at all? And is there an easy way to describe it for people at home that they kind of understand things like, oh, EOS has 21 block producers, and that's how it can be fast. So what's your underlying infrastructure, I guess?
So I would go ahead and basically say that we've started from this standpoint where we said, unless we can really significantly improve the throughput, there will be a kind of bandwidth limitation that will always suffocate the adoption. Even if you have something interesting, you will not be able to scale. So then we've basically researched every interesting direction, and what we came up with were these two conclusions: that you could adopt some immediate paths to scale that would bring a 2x, 3x, 5x improvement, but that would ultimately not make a difference beyond 3 to 6 months. And this were basically vertical scaling solutions, where you just improve different things within the computers that you have, and so forth, and just try to process a bit more on each of the computers, but still you do this in an architecture where you process the same workload in all the computers at the same time. Whereas this other approach that seemed very promising from a fundamental standpoint was this horizontal solution, where you basically divide the workload and conquer. And by being able to parallelize transaction processing, you can significantly improve the throughput. Then the question becomes, how efficient can you do this? How computationally and energy efficient can you do this? Then second question, and perhaps most importantly, is how secure can the entire architecture be? Because it doesn't matter how much you scale and how efficient it is if the security doesn't stand or hold water. So what we've done is we've built this, the entire architecture is built on two important breakthroughs. The first one is called adaptive state sharding. Of course, sharding is already known, is this idea that you can partition the network into smaller networks so that you can parallelize transaction processing. Adaptivity was this very important insight that from everything I've seen, Elrond was the first to bring in, and everyone then immediately adopted, of course, because it was so elegant. And it was just this idea that instead of deciding to start with a set number of shards, which would remain fixed because it would be difficult to change this in real time, you basically devise a formula through which you have a binary tree model based on which you can initially start with one shard, that you can split into two shards, then you can split into 4 shards, and so forth, so that in real time you can add or subtract shards as it's needed with the demand in the network. So and you can just imagine the complexity of handling this.
That's why I was going to jump in and try and remove some of that complexity for people at home, particularly the beginners that are listening. So I probably think the best way to think about this is, let's say that you've got 100 nodes or computers running some software, and then you say, well, each time the network gets so busy that there's, we need another 100 nodes, and then we're going to have 2 shards, so 2 networks going, rather than have all 200 nodes process everything. And then you have, the network continues to grow in popularity, and so then you have 404 shards, and then, some might go offline, and you go back down a number of shards. So it's a little bit like Amazon Web Services. You can hire more storage or more computation. Is that kind of a good basic description?
Sure. The whole point is that you have the scalability you need, and as you need more, you have this adaptivity. And adaptivity is the key word here, because it enables you to have this super high flexibility in the sense that you don't waste any resources if demand is not there. But then when demand is there, you can immediately meet demand and offer the resources that are needed.
Yeah, I think is the industry leading, as far as the research goes, approach to security, things like randomization of choosing which nodes are doing what, so attackers can't pick on a certain shard. Is that like how you guys have gone about it as well?
Yeah, so the maybe going to the second important breakthrough that the architecture is based on, it's called secure proof of stake, because it's this idea that you, on the one hand, eliminate this energy and computational waste issue that is not sustainable over the long run. So the larger you look, the larger the network becomes, the more unsustainable it becomes. And so we've changed that from proof of work to proof of stake, but specifically chose a version of proof of stake that was not susceptible to cartel attacks, that was not delegated proof of stake. And here I'm going to maybe detail a bit what the properties were that we've tried to optimize for. On the one hand, as I said, it's efficiency. So you don't have a resource inefficiency or energy computational waste problem. Then second, it's latency. So how fast can you process things? Is it really useful? Of course, the lower the latency is, the more useful things are. And then most important, again, all these properties are useful insofar as the security is really bulletproof. And then question is, how do you ensure this type of security for a network like this? And there are several layers of security that we've built in order to make sure that the network is very robust. First, you basically don't know in which shard you are going to be basically put in. As you create an address and this goes to a particular shard, you cannot foretell in which shard you will be put. Okay. Then let's say that you're a validator, part of a 400 nodes set that we currently have in a shard. Well, from that pool of 400 validators, you have 61 nodes that are chosen randomly every 6 seconds, so that you never know who will be in the consensus group. And as soon as you find out, you essentially don't have enough time to attack in an effective way so as to corrupt the shard. And so every 6 seconds, you have a different group that is randomly reshuffled. And then to increase this level of security at the end of each epoch, which at this point is defined as a 12-hour set, you basically have essentially 1/3 of nodes in each shard being randomly reshuffled to other shards, again, to make this even more unpredictable. And then, the epoch is currently 24 hours, not 12 hours.
Yep. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, that's helped my understanding, and I do like these different approaches, and even I think our audience is starting to understand a lot of this stuff that was, you know, bleeding edge and over everyone's head a year or two ago. So that's really good. Have there been any challenges in particular, like things that you thought were really undoable that you've found solutions for? And probably the other thing I want to ask was, in terms of proof of work and inefficiency, are you a believer that like it's necessary for Bitcoin to have that level of security, and we can have, you know, renewables, and Bitcoin ideally would be 100% renewable energy, and that's okay? Or you just think we shouldn't have, you know, hundreds of proof of work blockchains being wasteful?
No, this is, I think, a good question. So to be clear, I believe there's credit that goes to Satoshi and the Bitcoin community for their contribution. We would probably not have this discussion if Bitcoin would not be here. Yeah. The same goes for Ethereum. There's a lot of contribution there, and so forth. But I generally would say that we as humans tend to have a lot of biases, and one of the interesting biases is this kind of end of history illusion, that you believe that for some reason, all of a sudden technological progress will stop, and then things will not improve anymore. And since this is a technology that for which everything stops, you will not see better iterations and so forth. So the question is then, are you building an architecture that is able to keep updating like that, and not get frozen in the past, like a kind of infallible Bible, religiosity thing? And this is what sort of we've seen with Bitcoin to some extent. So people try to make a kind of holy element, to put a kind of holy element to Bitcoin that you cannot question, not discuss. Don't ever discuss the parameters, just accept, just believe this stuff. And whenever you question a bit, then there's a lot of backlash maybe. Yeah. So what I would say is we're trying to approach things much more rational in this sense. So you want an architecture that is improvable and capable to be improved. Otherwise, you're basically fundamentally constrained, and an architecture broken at its foundation will essentially not be able to get fixed. So it must overcome these challenges either through other kind of exercises, right? Yeah. You get religious and yeah, there's something a bit even funny there.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of tribalism for all communities, not just Bitcoin. Yeah, the next thing I wanted to ask about was the token. So I can't remember if the symbols changed as well, but these days it's the ELG, and I think there's a bit of confusion about the token swap, and is one related to gold or pegged to gold, or do you want to maybe explain the tokenomics there?
Sure. So the idea with EGLD or eGold is initially we said we went with eGold because the idea was pretty simple. If you want to build an architecture and an application and a currency that would be designed to be understood and used at internet scale or global scale, then it's very useful to think in maybe different terms that you would for a niche group of people, right? And so we said with eGold, the idea was that you had books, and then you had ebooks, you had mail, and then email, you had gold, and then eGold.
Okay.
And in each case, you basically had something similar, but very, very different in the sense that it almost got superpowers. So the ebooks, you can basically fit thousands of ebooks in there and read them and so forth. Yeah. With email, it's instant, it's super cheap. Why wait for a mail that arrives 2 weeks after you send it? And then it's the same with eGold. You have a lot of interesting properties in gold, but what if you could have all those and much more in a very efficient way on top of the internet? This is what we have with eGold. Of course, we're essentially taking some of the most interesting properties that we've discovered, but combining them in a way that we believe has not been done in the space. Because if you put the architecture, the user interface, and this capped supply of eGold that has a very interesting economic model in the sense that you have the capped supply at a P number. So it's 31,415,926. This is the total max supply that can ever exist. But the interesting way that new emission or rewards come for validators is either designed to come always from adoption. So if you have fees, then there will not be any kind of emission. But if you don't have fees, the network, of course, requires security and requires capacity to process transactions. So you will either have adoption and then no other emission comes into circulation, or if you don't have sufficient adoption yet, then you have a decreasing emission that cannot exceed a certain threshold. And in this way, you have a very incentivized group of validators around the world. And then coming to your question initially about maybe how this differentiates itself from EOS or other proof-of-stake architectures, the idea is that in Elrond, we have 2,169 nodes from around the world, and we're just moving to 3,200 that will be distributed and so forth. So both the economic model is very interesting because it has some different properties. It has some similar properties to Bitcoin in the sense that it's with the capped supply, and there's a particular design there that very, very soon will drive things in a way that cannot be foreseen immediately, but as things pick up, it will become interesting. But then on the other hand, you have smart contracts, of course, very different from Bitcoin, but then more similar to Ethereum, but then perhaps different than both Bitcoin and Ethereum. You have this very simple and intuitive, yet powerful user interface where you have a distributed DNS built in, you have this idea of progressive security, and you have this very simple interaction with the most useful blockchain features. And the idea is that if you see the entire space that we currently are in, perhaps the largest problem, the largest elephant in the room, is not the fights that we see among the projects. Maybe the most interesting problem is, how do you bring the next billion people inside the blockchain space? Because if you can do that, then you'll basically not have any other problem. You won't have time to focus on Bitcoin and Ethereum and the other projects. So this is why we built Maiar and Elrond, and this is why we're extremely excited by the following period.
Yeah, just one question I had quickly. Cardano, for example, have got the different layers for smart contract execution versus the currency, the ADA. Are you guys all, the computation all happens on the same layer as transactions? Is anything to add there?
No, so we do have WASM VM that has a modified gas model to be applied on the blockchain. And on top of this WASM VM, we have a Rust framework. Then we have some libraries. Then we have an IDE that integrates this entire dev toolkit in order to simplify the experience for developers. The interaction with the token is basically so it either for transactions or for smart contract calls, you're using the same currency. I'm not sure how it is in Cardano to be very precise.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, it cut out a little bit there, but no, it's all right. It came back in. Awesome. So is there any projects that are live at the moment that are really exciting for you? Is it the DeFi stuff that we're starting to see on all ecosystems? Are there any projects that have even come across from Ethereum or other chains to Elrond, or what are some of your favorites?
Sure. So the focus, of course, has been to first make sure that the architecture is live, because having this type of performance opens up, as we've said before, a new kind of solution space. So other than having it live, we focus on a lot of security audits, a lot of penetration testing, and so forth. As you've seen probably in the space, there have been almost all the new blockchains have had a kind of fail or stop or rollback. And it's not something that should be treated lightly, because this speaks a lot to what has been done. It's much easier to say things than do them. This is why we put a lot of focus in there. And for now, fortunately, or not fortunately, because fortunately is the wrong kind of word to use in this situation, but because we've not slept so many nights just to basically put in the work and test things out and get them ready, we've not had any halt, any double spans, and so forth. And this is great. But other than that, we've focused on accelerating the growth of the ecosystem quite significantly. We have something like 120 partners within the ecosystem and growing almost each day. In fact, we've started from the beginning of the year, we've started a marathon of 100 days of hypergrowth. Yes.
Yeah, I did see that, and I saw the chart went hyperbolic as well, which always worries me when I put my trader hat on. But no, that's all right. So, what does the hypergrowth involve?
So the idea is that we've said we have now the technology. We've built some tools that are exceptional for developers, simplify the interaction and so forth. We've built 30% royalty fees that are sent and embedded in the smart contracts design, so that if you're a developer and write a smart contract, you get 30% royalties from all the transaction process by your smart contract, which I think is extremely useful for developers. But maybe going beyond that, we've said, once you have this all prepared, that's the point where things become very interesting, because we've built an ESDT, so an Elrond standard digital token, which is the sort of equivalent of an ERC20, but just improved on a few layers, much faster with native speed and a lot less transaction cost. But other than that, the idea is that once you have this, you'll see a lot of projects just coming in and exploding, in the sense that adoption is really there. We've grown the community tremendously. So Elrond has a very, very passionate community around the world, and we are super grateful to have so many people involved. And going beyond that, we said the 100-day hypergrowth period will start a growth engine within the Elrond economy in a way that we've not seen in the space before. And there have been many things that we've announced that are literally over the roof, in the sense that either technically they're very, very interesting, elegant, and so forth, either from an adoption standpoint, some projects, integrations, and so forth, listings for liquidity, much more exposure, and so forth. But what we care most about is Maiar, on the one hand, which brings a kind of adoption that is the purest progress you can get. So it's nice that people in the blockchain space, let's say, love announcements, love new integrations, listings, and so forth. Yeah. But there's nothing more valuable for an ecosystem than users. If you can bring new users in, then everything else will follow. Everything else is basically a function of the number of users that you can really bring in the ecosystem. And so with Maiar, we've been pushing super hard to get this application live, because we said, as I've said before, the largest problem in the space beyond performance, once performance is solved, is that we have the same sort of 100 million people in the space, and we're just playing a zero-sum game. I steal a few people from you, you steal a few people from the other projects, and this is a very narrow game that is played. But the interesting thing is that we are almost 8 billion people in the world. So the opportunity is so large that once you think about it, you start wondering how come no one is speaking more about this super huge opportunity. And then Maiar is specifically the path through which we escape this narrow niche or narrow group of people, and we say, how do we bring the next billion people in? And the simple and clear idea is that, of course, through simplification, radical simplification of everything. For as long as people need to interact with private public keys, need to learn sort of rocket science, you're basically dead on arrival. But I'll let you follow up on a few of those, and
You know, I was just going to say, it is something that we've touched on a lot. It's like the gold versus Bitcoin crowd, and then you've got like silver versus gold, Bitcoin versus Ethereum, and then others. And we say all the time, like, zoom out, where all these communities are so small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things that people from the outside must like look in and go, what are those crypto guys talking about? But yeah.
Exactly. And so coming back to this, we've said, how do we really bring the next major wave of adoption, where maybe as Bitcoin was to the cypherpunks and Ethereum to developers, Elrond will likely be to the average internet user. So a very different group of people, much more broader group of people. And so Maiar is this very intense effort to simplify things, embed the most advanced or interesting technology that you can really use, and give a new type of experience. And you have this hero tag, and the hero tag is just a username that you can use just as you use an email, which is very simple, very intuitive. Everyone in the world will be able to use a username instead of private public keys. And so you've had variations of this as well in the DNS on the web, or in the different versions that of a distributed DNS on Ethereum. But what we've done in Elrond is we've extended this idea to a point where you can not only send eGold to the username in Maiar, but you can send Bitcoin as well very soon, Binance as well, Ethereum as well. And this is how the Internet of Money will really look like, when you can send this almost instantly at a trivial cost to any friend that you have in the world. At that point, you're starting to actually behave very differently, because it's super simple, super useful, and this is how money should work, right?
Yeah. So what Ben's talking about, for those that haven't used like the Ethereum name service, or the .zil crypto addresses as well, rather than having your long string of letters and numbers that's your address, you'll just have a name that you can buy, like Nuggets News or Ben Elrond, and I can just send coins, and it's a lot easier to remember someone's name, obviously, than that long address. So yeah, that's fantastic. And it's not just your wallet, it's, you know, integrating it into your whole website or your smart contract, so people know, oh, I want to go and, you know, I want to go shopping, so I'll just send some coins to you know, shopping.elrond or whatever it is. So yeah, that's a big you know, taking away all that, abstracting all that difficulty.
And imagine just for 1 second what emails would mean if instead of your name, you would have a 31 string character string that you would have to type for every person. Just imagine how ridiculous that would be. And then once imagining it, then come back and see that this is what we're doing in the blockchain space every day, which is it's almost crazy, right?
Yeah. So I was going to say, on the other end of the spectrum, people did have to paste that in the email days, though, in the early days, and that does show you like where we're at in the crypto space.
Exactly. And this is why we're pushing for enabling something super simple, where you don't have to think about this thing a lot. You can just focus on your friends using the money, sending it over, and so forth. This is one of the elements. Of course, there are some other elements, as this idea of progressive security. There's this notion in the blockchain space that when someone comes in, you really need to teach them the security of a nuclear bomb. All of a sudden, although they don't have any money or they're just looking around, you have to teach them this. At least this is the behavior that you see with the wallets, right?
Yeah, no, it's so hard. It's something that we talk about with people all the time, you know, the seed phrases, the private keys and all that. So it's got to be better as well, yeah.
So once you have this, then of course you'll see users starting to adopt this with the speed that you've not seen before. In Maiar, you can basically put in your phone number and then have contacts there, just your friends. Either you send through your phone number basically the money, or through your username or hero tag, and then on top of this simplicity, this is the beauty of it. This is just a start. On top of this simplicity, you'll have DeFi elements, you'll have NFT elements. Imagine having the swap or the lending protocol within this super simple experience. At that point, it's not 10 people playing around with swaps, but you have a different group of people. And this is at the heart of Elrond. We're trying to take some of these things, improve them to the maximum that can be done, but then open them to the entire world. And we believe that there's a huge value for the users to be able to adopt this technology, use it with the highest level of security, but then also the highest level of user experience. And just to maybe make it clear, and coming back to the hypergrowth element, we've had, in about 6 months from the launch of the Elrond network, about 115,000 accounts created within the network, and then about 1 million transactions that have been processed. Now, in 4 days after the Maiar launch, we basically doubled that in 4 days. This is what adoption really looks like. We've basically crossed 2 million transactions and 200,000 accounts in only 4 days. Now, of course, we've doubled that, almost doubled that again in the 3 weeks that we have. But this is what I'm speaking about. We've changed the speed from an interesting growth dynamic that we had. We've gone through hypergrowth, and this at this speed, you really feel things moving and so forth. This is one of the elements, and of course, DeFi on Elrond will be a very, very interesting element. We've actually announced a DeFi 2.0 module that we're launching on Elrond with swaps, with lending, and then with a launchpad platform. And once this kicks in, of course, it's like the economic engine shifts in the third gear, and things become even more interesting. So I'll let you maybe pick on some of that, but yeah, there's a lot happening, and we're quite excited about it.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's the point where I was sort of up to with my own research and reading about you guys as well. A lot of projects are now to that stage where they have this technology that's faster or better than the high gas fees on Ethereum. They're integrating the DeFis. They've got they're trying to say come and use our products. I still don't think people have got an easy wallet. So yeah, I'll have a play around with the Elrond wallet after this as well. But no, I think that's pretty much most things that I wanted to cover. So I'll put it back to you if there's anything that you want to add. But I think that's been great today. Again, I had some questions. I wanted to know the pros and cons and ins and outs of it all, and I've got that good understanding today. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where it all goes and how you guys progress. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having the discussion. I would say that although we've seen a very interesting growth, just as we've said, the idea is that if you look at the early internet days, you had two important moments that radically changed the trajectory and growth. This were the transition from dial-up to broadband, which essentially changed everything, because without broadband, economics would not have made sense for the businesses to really adopt the technology, to really build things. And then secondly, and equally important, it's this simplicity. Until you had the browser, the internet was basically almost nothing. Okay, the technology was there, it was beautiful, but for a technical guy, I mean, it was only when you had all these people starting to click the websites, point and click, that there grew a market for you to really ship something, to build something interesting. And I believe we're at that particular moment with blockchain as well. So we've made a transition from dial-up to broadband. It takes some time until it really sinks in how important the implications are. But then once you couple this with simple UX, it's like once you start a growth that is based on a particular rate of growth, you just need a few days to understand the trajectory that you can never really pick up the speed as an older blockchain maybe, or fundamentally different architecture. So this is why we're very excited. Again, I would underscore that Elrond is not a Bitcoin killer or an Ethereum killer. It's not what we're focusing on. This is just a sort of game or distortion that people try to put you in. Are you in this box? Are you in that box? But there's a much larger space here for collaboration, for complementarity, and we're quite happy to have discussions with the ecosystem. We think that both Ethereum and Bitcoin have brought significant contributions, but we also think this entire space can go to a point where, in hindsight, it will be incredible.
Yeah.
You'll just look back and try to remember do you know when we had this discussion and this discussion, and look how things went. And I think this is what we have before us.
Awesome. No, fantastic. That's been really good, Ben. I really appreciate that. I hope you guys have enjoyed that one at home. I know we do have plenty of Elrond fans in the audience, so I finally got the chance to sit down and have this conversation. Good luck with it all. We'll have to catch up again in future. And yeah, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, and happy to receive any kind of feedback once you start testing things. And yeah, looking forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.